the City of Victory. One of the most mysterious Roman ruins that's ever been discovered was found in a wild patch of forest in northern Bulgaria, and it was once called Nicopolis ad Istrum, but today it's known more casually as the City of Victory. These days the city is decimated, in ruins swallowed by the European woodland. But 2,000 years ago the city was built in celebration of a great victory. Emperor Trajan won the Dacian Wars in 106 AD and established a new city overlooking the crossing of the Rositsa and Yantra rivers. It was fairly small, measuring only 74 acres and sheltered by a strong outer wall. But inside was a central forum, public buildings, a basilica and public baths. The city also boasted a temple of Cybele. Although Christianity was on the rise, it still wasn't the official religion of Rome. Most cities had churches and temples dedicated to the old gods. You'd have no idea just how grand Nicopolis ad Istrum was by looking at its remains today. There are a few fragmented ruins of buildings and a handful of pillars that miraculously still stand. But the outer wall is gone, and so is any sign of glory. By 447 AD, the town was already falling into disrepair. The unstoppable warlord Attila the Hun plowed through the area, massacring everyone in sight. Only about a quarter of the people remained, but they didn't last very long. And now for number 7. But first I wanted to give a big shout out to Hillary, her husband Jeffrey, and Margaret Slezak. Thanks so much for watching and supporting OE. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. The Canary Islands civilization. In the Canary Islands, researchers used a drone to discover a lost tomb filled to the brim with skeletons. The ancient tomb is from an extinct civilization that disappeared roughly 1,000 years ago. It's one thing to find a tomb, but the sheer number of bones here was staggering. Scientists say there are bones from 72 natives of the Guanche civilization. They identified 62 adult skeletons and 10 skeletons from newborn babies, but the skeletons weren't complete. Instead, they were shattered into thousands of itty-bitty fragments. So, who were the Guanche? They populated the Canary Islands of Spain starting around 800 AD. They were the first known humans to live on the island, likely migrating there from North Africa. But a lot of their history remains unknown. Historians think that when Spanish settlers arrived, they absorbed the Guanches into their culture. This resulted in total annihilation of Guanche beliefs and cultural traditions. This particular tomb was found on the island of Gran Canaria. Other tombs have been found on the island before, but never like this. Archaeologist Veronica Alberto said that there's never been so many newborn skeletons found from the culture. Researchers also uncovered the remnants of burial shrouds crafted from animal skins. All the evidence points to sophisticated funerary rituals. The ancient tomb has only led to more unanswerable questions. Experts had to travel 75 feet down a pit to get into the tomb. It was only spotted in the first place because researchers were flying a drone into the cave mouth when they saw shards of bone. The lost Egyptian tomb. Researchers in Egypt have just found an underground tomb from 3,200 years ago. It belonged to a steward at the sacred temple of Amun during the reign of the greatest pharaoh known to history, Ramses II. The ancient tomb was unearthed by researchers from Italy and the Netherlands. They worked closely with the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Egypt to identify the burial ground in Saqqara. It isn't just a tomb though, it's a full complex. There's a freestanding temple on the surface, a colonnade courtyard, and then a creepy passage leading to the burial chambers beneath. Down in the dark, archaeologists found incredible wall reliefs depicting the steward and his wife. His name was Panassi and his wife was called Baya. They're depicted in stone reliefs participating in religious rituals. On one of the reliefs, the couple is seated at an offering table with a priest. This was likely a display of the couple organizing their end-of-life care with one of Panassi's subordinates at the temple. Couples would often work out their journey to the afterlife long before they ever died. And in ancient Egypt, it was up to you to get a tomb built and learn how to navigate the underworld. Otherwise, it was believed you'd have a hard time reaching your final resting place, an ancient chariot. Mike Smith was the man with a metal detector who accidentally found a historical relic worth over $1 million. At 45 years old, Mike had never imagined he'd uncover the only Celtic chariot ever found by a metal detectorist in England, let alone make a fortune from it. Mike has been an archaeological hobbyist for a long time. The Pembrokeshire local has found odds and ends in the past, but never anything this incredible. The exact location of the discovery is being kept a secret to deter potential treasure thieves. All I can tell you without ruining the site is that Mike's discovery was made somewhere in a field, and that doesn't really narrow it down. The first thing Mike found was what he thought was a medieval brooch. He took the artifact home and obsessed over it. Then he went back to the site the next day and started finding pieces of red enamel. So right away, Mike knew he was onto something big. The brooch turned out to be a Celtic horse harness, and the red enamel was from around 25 AD. Mike already knew a thing or two about chariot burials, so he was aware of the potential, and by the time he was done digging, he had 34 artifacts from a chariot that had likely been buried with a tribal chief 2,000 years ago. The Iron Age as an archaeological era was between 1200 and 600 BC. In England, though, the timeline was a little different. Their Iron Age didn't start until 800 BC and didn't wrap up until the Romans invaded in 43 AD. On the British Isles, people were significantly more primitive for way longer than the rest of Europe. If it hadn't been for the Roman invasion, the UK may have continued their simplistic existence for centuries. Although I say primitive, the Iron Age was still an exciting time, and the people weren't simpletons by any means. There are over 3,000 Iron Age fortresses scattered across the UK. If you were a tribal chieftain, chances are you'd be buried with your trusty chariot, maybe even a few horses to keep you company in the afterlife. This particular chariot, while no specific details of its owner are known, is incredibly rare. UK law says that Mike must sell the artifacts to a museum and split the profits with the landowner. But even then, he's still set to make $1 million from the deal. The giant Buddha. In rural China, an enormous stone Buddha was discovered carved into the side of a mountain. Just look at this thing. It looks like the picture was made with AI, but it wasn't. This is a real giant Buddha head carved into a mountainside that nobody noticed for centuries. The shocking face in the stone was uncovered in Guizhou province. How nobody noticed it before is beyond shocking, since it's right at the edge of a vast field of crops. It must have been totally obscured by foliage. There isn't a lot of information on how it was rediscovered, but I can tell you how it was built. Guizhou province is home to at least 10 major ethnic groups. China isn't just a country of one single culture. China itself is enormous and consists of hundreds of diverse cultures and unique groups. China's home to vast deserts, fairy tale mountains, and paradise beaches. Its landscapes are just as unique as those in the United States. The big difference between them is that Homo sapiens have been in China for tens of thousands of years. The larger-than-life face carved into the stone is believed to have been made during the Tang dynasty around 1300 years ago. Legend says that Master Hai Nang wanted to construct a pair of Buddha statues in the mountains. He and his disciple wished to build them as big as possible so they wouldn't be destroyed by an earthquake. But before they could finish the work, Master Hai Nang died. The second Buddha was never constructed, and the first one was swallowed by vegetation, with only its face partially finished. The witch bottle. Hidden inside an English chimney, a demolition contractor accidentally made a very creepy discovery. The contractor found an old glass bottle full of human teeth and fish hooks. Archaeologists believe that the bottle was used as a tool of witchcraft in the 19th century. The contractor was called in to take down the chimney of a historic inn and pub located in Watford. The pub used to be known as the Star and Garter Inn, but now it's nothing more than a boring private residence. It likely would have been cooler to keep it as a historic inn, but to each their own. The contractor, while dismantling the chimney, pulled the disturbing artifact out of the sooty brick and gasped. Not only was it full of human teeth and fish hooks, there was still a murky liquid inside, and some reflective shards of glass. This is hardly the only witchcraft artifact pulled out of a chimney. According to the Smithsonian Institution, there are at least 100 witch bottles currently in circulation. They've been pulled from old buildings and ruined churchyards across Great Britain, and most come from the 1600s. But why were they built in the 17th century, you may ask? It's because that was when Europe was aflame with witch panic. People were so afraid of witches that they felt the need to protect themselves using their own breed of magic. A household would take an ordinary glass bottle, then fill it with weird stuff like pins, human urine, thorns, rusty nails, and fingernail clippings, just to mention a few. Basically, they used anything that was kind of gross. Then the bottle was shoved up a chimney or buried under the floor. It was meant to ward away any potential witches looking to do the homeowners harm. If you wanted to ward off witches, what would you store in a bottle before hiding it in your house? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The Ice Maiden's face. Up in the clouds, 21,000 feet at the top of a Peruvian volcano, mountaineer Miguel Zarata discovered the frozen body of a young woman who'd been sacrificed in a brutal ritual. But now, 28 years later, the legendary Ice Maiden has been brought back to life. She's one of the greatest discoveries ever made in Peru. 500 years ago, the Ice Maiden was dressed in a ceremonial tunic and headpiece. She was likely fed drugs and alcohol in the weeks leading up to her sacrifice. Then she was dragged to the peak of the Ampato volcano, where she was made to kneel before the Inca gods. And as she kneeled at the top of the slumbering volcano in the swirling snow, she was bludgeoned in the back of the head. Her body was arranged with bowls and figurines and other offerings to the gods. She was left there to freeze into a natural mummy. Then, in the early 1990s, she was found by Miguel while ascending the volcano. Scientists named her Juanita. Researchers at Johns Hopkins University were the ones who studied her body. They uncovered her cause of death and learned that she was about 15 years old at the time of her sacrifice. Although it seems harsh, the Inca likely didn't intend it to be so brutal. By the time Juanita reached the top of the volcano, she was likely so stoned on drugs that she had no idea what was going on. Then her death was swift and painless. It's what happened after her death that would have brought great honor to Juanita and her family. Such an epic sacrifice would have been remembered for a very long time. The child was likely deified, turned into a goddess and worshipped by villagers at the bottom of the volcano for generations. She'd likely still be a goddess today if the Spanish hadn't shown up and ruined the Inca Empire. I said at the beginning that she was brought back to life, and that's true, though she wasn't reanimated as a zombie. Scientists from Poland and Peru have recreated her face, bringing her to life in a truly vivid way. Oscar Nielsen was at the head of the team. He's a specialist in facial reconstruction who physically built the silicon bust of the Ice Maiden. Oscar says it took over 400 hours to model the face. Scientists used body scans, DNA studies, and skull measurements to get Juanita just right. They also used ethnological characteristics to properly shape and color Juanita. The end result is what scientists feel is an accurate model of the Ice Maiden, the young Inca girl who was transformed into a goddess. Roman boxing gloves. There's only one pair of Roman boxing gloves that survived the past 2,000 years. They were discovered buried near what remains of Hadrian's Wall in northern England. Historians are very aware that the Romans loved boxing. They were into all the best sports, just like their friends over in Greece. Greeks and Romans were fond wrestlers, boxers, and even had their own version of mixed martial arts. This is widely known because of wall paintings and sculptures depicting boxers. Yet, up until this discovery, nobody had ever found a physical pair of boxing gloves used by a Roman fighter. The gloves are extremely fascinating. They aren't as flashy as modern boxing gloves, though. The gloves were made as a simple set of protective guards to fit over the knuckles. The gloves would have been packed full of natural material like grass or hay to soften the blow between knuckle and face. They were made so well that the only surviving pair still fits perfectly on a modern person's hands, and one of them still has the indentations of the original fighter's knuckles. The gloves were used in the year 120 AD, and Dr. Andrew Burley, the director of excavations, said that the hairs on the back of his neck stood up when he made the discovery. He was astonished at the chance find underneath the ruins of an old stone fortress. When people fled the fort, which was positioned at the final frontier of the Roman Empire, they left behind personal possessions. Researchers found swords, household items, and the boxing gloves. They were likely used by a soldier in the Roman army. It was fairly standard for soldiers to box as a form of fitness and to keep themselves limber for a fight. Which of these incredible new discoveries did you find the most interesting? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.